We left off about just selecting the guitar and kind of getting the going back to the idea. You heard your idea you have in your head and or you're shooting for, and then obviously again going back to serving the song, which is very important. And we want to start thinking about different tones for different parts. If we're overdubbing it like lead versus rhythm, if you're overdubbing leads on top of it, if you're not playing the rhythm, almost like in a Van Halen thing where you're doing the rhythm and then you go right into the lead off of that, thinking of it almost separate. Just start thinking about different tones and really, once we're dialing in the heads and adjusting to how he's playing, then we'll be not in this segment so much. The next segment will be playing in the song, like in the session, and adjusting the sound in the session and adjusting accordingly. But the next step from the player, obviously it goes from the player to the guitar and it flows down. And where does it go next? It goes to the amp. So it's hands, guitar, amp. And I always talk about committing, and I'm still sticking to it. The tones we get here, the tones you're shooting for at the amp, if you like, wow, this is a great guitar sound, like that's what we want to get. That's what we're trying to capture. We're not trying to, it's not going to sound one way on the amp and then another way once we get it inside, onto tape or Pro Tools. So the tones we get here is going to be the tones that hopefully, in a perfect world, in a bubble, those are the tones that are going to be in the final mix. It doesn't always work out that way, but it's always best to shoot for that. And then obviously, we have the tools available to adjust if it's not exactly, because like I said, what happens is once you start, you have a really bright guitar sound or a really on the opposite end, a really bassy guitar sound. And once you start stacking a bunch of stuff and layering extra guitars and putting the vocals on top of it, if the bass hasn't already been recorded, I actually like to record bass after guitars a lot of times for various reasons. I can get into that in a whole different thing. But so once you layer everything on top of it, if you're doing an overdubbing multi-track kind of situation, when things start piling up, sometimes elements of the sound that you initially captured can get covered up. And we'll be dealing in the last segment of dealing with the mix and how to adjust that. But ultimately, you want to try and get as close to the sound that you're looking for at the source. And the last thing is, it goes back to committing. Try not to fall into the fixing in the mix trap. I've had to do it plenty of times, especially in the early days where, we had no time. It's like, oh, that's good enough. That sounds good. The take is good, whatever. And then it's like, but then you're left to pull your hair out of your head, trying to figure out and trying to make it work in the mix and trying all sorts of different things in EQ and compression and just, it's a rabbit hole. It's not good and it creates a lot of stress. And plenty of times I've had to mix records that I didn't record the guitar, and I've had to fix a lot, and it's like, oh, well, why didn't they just get it right to begin with, So, that's my philosophy, is just always try and get it right to begin with. And getting tones. Like I said, my recurring theme, again, commit. Spend time dialing in your tone. Sometimes it comes really quickly. Sometimes you pull up the thing, you plug in, and you turn two knobs, and it's like, wow, that sounds great. And it's like, okay, do I need to mess with it? If it really feels right, trust your gut, commit, and say, that's great, that's awesome. Sometimes it doesn't present itself right away, and you really need to dial it. So, you want to take the right time and just really spend your time tweaking the knobs and, what about on the rhythm pickup? What about on the lead pickup? What does it sound like? Maybe we need to change it there. Because if you don't commit, why? you'll never be done. If you don't make a stand somewhere, you'll just cycle through endless options, and that's never a good thing. So the last point on here where it says treat it like an experiment, you need to control, and I'll explain that a little further as we're going out there. But again, goes to playing the song. So I'll have him play a certain part, like play the song we're about to do, you know, and he'll play this part. And if it's like say it's a palm muting part, and he's like dun 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 dun, it's like, okay, so now we have the guitar that we think is going to be right. Now let's plug into the Mesa Boogie head and through the Marshall cabinet, play the same thing. Go to the next head, play the same thing. So the control is basically, you know, in any kind of scientific thing, it's a constant. So the control is the part you're playing. Mm-hmm. So he needs to, you know, I get a player and it's like, oh, let's try this guitar. And they plug into one amp and they're like, and then I plug into the next amp and they're like, ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, that's not going to do me any good. You have to play this, right. You have to play, it's a totally different thing. You have to, you know, so play the same part, just so we can, you know, dial the head. And the control then goes from the part to the head, and then, okay, that head's good. You filter through the next head, find the head that's right, and it's all with one guitar cabinet. So that's a control there. So now you're just selecting the head. So the part's the same, the cabinet's the same, just the head's changed. And here are the differences between the heads. Now find the head that's best. It's like, oh, that one's really good. Now what's left? The cabinets. Take the same head, and it sounds good in this cabinet, but what does it sound like in this cabinet? And what does it sound like in this cabinet? If you have options like that. So then you're getting the best possible guitar, the best with the same part, the best possible head with the best possible cabinet. So you're trying to just create the best matches for everything, essentially. Choosing a head. Start with the player setup. That's, again, my philosophy. It doesn't necessarily always have to be, but that's what I usually do. And then, you know, it helps to know, it helps to know on the tech side of things, it does help to know the characteristics of like what type of power tubes is the head. The preamp tube is, for the most part, on almost everything is a 12AX7 preamp. It's this kind of standard preamp side of things. There are other ones, but it's usually the 12AX7. The types of power tubes, there's usually 3 main ones, and they all have different characteristics, and I'll explain on a couple of them what the difference is. But the 3 main power tubes are EL34, 6L6 or 6550, which is actually the same thing, it's just a different designation, and then the EL84. Like I said, once I get over there, we can show a little bit more of the differences between them. But you know, one has a tighter low end response, one has a more mid range response and more attack, and the EL84, which is the only one out of these heads, we don't have a head with EL84. But the classic example of a head with an EL84 is a Vox AC30. And that power, the big thing with those is they saturate easier. It's a lower wattage, a lower output power tube. So they saturate more. That's the characteristic sound of a Vox AC30 when you crank it up. You're getting, it's not just preamp distortion, you're getting power amp distortion, and that's like a big part of what the sound, how the sound jumps out at you, how it makes the speakers push out and push the air. And the saturation that like the EL84, the lower wattage, does, that's a big part of the sound. And it's just knowing what they all sound like. Like I said, I don't have an example of the EL84, that's why I'm describing that a little more. And then lower wattage versus higher wattage. It's the same kind of thing. Lower wattage, like say the Marshall JCM 800 over there. I think that one's 100 watt. If I remember that my friend Cody from the Blood Brothers, he lent me that, so kind enough to lend me that head. The lower wattage, Marshalls, they usually came in 50 and 100 watt styles of that. And like the lower wattage has a little bit of a sweeter tone, has more harmonics, And again, the same thing. The power amp on the lower wattage one, you're getting more power amp distortion. There's less headroom in the power amp, so when you crank the master volume up, that's going to saturate more, and that's going to give you a little bit more the grindy kind of full distortion, as opposed to 100 watt. 100 watt is going to be more of a bark and more of it jumps a little more because there's more headroom. It's a cleaner power amp section. You have more 100 watts, so you have more headroom, so it's not going to clip as easily. It's going to be really loud, and sometimes the breakup is more from the speaker. If you're using like lower wattage speakers, 100 watt head, and you're using a cabinet with 25 watt Celestians in it, so 4 times 25, 100, and you're cranking that up, and so the speakers are actually clipping a little bit, and that's part of the sound of the that's just a different tonal characteristic of distortion. There's all different kinds of distortion. There's preamp distortion and power amp distortion and even speaker distortion. And they all impart different characteristics in the tone. And the higher wattage, punchier, more headroom. And then you've got like very low watt combos. The guy Griffin, who was here earlier, talks about like using his little combo amps and stuff like that. And perfect example is Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin. And so many people think, like a lot of those early records, they think it's you see him live and you see all the Marshall stacks behind him and everything like that, like Heartbreaker and all that. That was like a 5 watt or a 10 watt Gibson combo. That's the guitar sound on that record. And a lot of the Zeppelin records, a lot of those guitar sounds are actually 10, 15, 20 watt combos, 5 watt combos. But then you're miking up and it sounds huge. And part of that is also, it's the same kind of thing because you're getting a lot of power amp and speaker distortion because you're just pushing the crap out of the amp. And you're not moving a lot of air necessarily, but it's almost like the same thing as if you have a higher wattage amp and you're pushing it to its limit, but it's going to be excruciatingly loud. Sometimes it's too loud and it's hard to rein that in. But the lower wattage combos, you can get that kind of push and that saturation at a much lower volume. And even the Mesa Boogie Mark V that we have here, that the Mesa people were so nice to lend us, they have settings for 90 watts, 45 watts, and 10 watts. And you can put them and kick it down to super low wattage and get that kind of, that kind of overdrive and that kind of thing. And it's really nice feature and it's really versatile. And again, there's all different things. They all have their place and they're all tonal characteristics, and they're just more palette. There's more colors on your palette to paint with. All right, so I guess I can stand up. We're not going to plug into everything yet, but I'm just going to go through everything that we have here. Amps that we have here. This is a Marshall JCM 2000. This is a more modern take on the JCM 800. This is the dual super lead. I think this is 60 watts, if I'm not mistaken. No, this is 100. This is DSL 100. And then the cousin, the ancestor of that next one is the Marshall 800. This is an all-time classic. This is the sound of a lot of rock records and even a lot of metal records, especially earlier metal records. But fantastic head, and you really can't go wrong with a Marshall. You go anywhere from AC/DC to even Slayer. They use Marshall 800s, Guns N' Roses, all lots of different things, lots of different artists. Underneath, we've got a Mesa. This is actually a single rectifier with a reverb, and really good for metal. That's really more of the standard that a lot of people go to is the rectifiers, either the single dual, or a lot of people use the triple. You use a triple. I used to use a triple a lot. Triple was on a lot of the earlier Dillinger records. And this is Mesa's newest flagship. They have their Mark series. Most notably, early Mesa stuff is like Carlos Santana and stuff in the 70s. But then what really came to be was Metallica. And the Mark II, with Mark II-C, which was I believe a mod of a Mark II, but it was the Mark II-C+, that's the the classic. I think that's the Black Album, if I'm not mistaken. That's the sound of that. But this thing is an incredibly versatile head. It's 3 channels. It's got an amazing clean sound. It's got an old-time spring reverb tank, which sounds amazing. I love spring reverbs on amps whenever you can.
Each individual channel.
And it's it's
really
adjustable
nice.
on each channel. You know, the classic, the Mark series, the thing that always separated the Mark series was the graphic EQ. They had them on all of them, and that's the constant that runs throughout. But this thing is, I can't say enough great things about this. This thing is, it's really versatile in the studio, and you can get a huge variety of tones on it. And then this is another one of that's become a little more of a standard in metal and even like hardcore and like the worlds that I work in a lot, is the PV6505. It used to be called the 5150, but then Eddie Van Halen took his trademark off of it, so now they call it the 6505. But it's essentially the same amp, and really good. It's kind of almost a Marshall-like tone, but a little more gain, and it's a kind of a really good, thick, kind of mid-rangey guitar sound. It can be good for a lot of rock, but it's also, a lot of people use it on metal. And then we have 3 different types of cabinets. We've got a classic Marshall 412 cabinet. This should have the vintage 30s in it, I believe. And then we've got a Black Star, who is another company that makes some great amps. But they have this is just a cabinet, and we can't really show the camera in the back, but this is an open back cabinet. So it's similar to like what like on a Vox AC30 combo amp. The back is not sealed, so a lot of the sound escapes out of the back, and so you can mic the back of the cabinet, and that's another technique a lot of people use for a tonal variation. Then we have an orange 212, and these should have vintage 30s in them as well. But instead of a 412, just the 212, you know, obviously it's smaller, less space inside the box, so it's a little bit tighter of a low-end response. So we've got these 3, and plus the orange uses a big thing, another thing that influences it, believe it or not, is the grill cloth on the cabinet itself. The orange uses the original old school basket, really thick basket grill cloth, which was also similar on the original Marshall cabinets. And you can't even, like, if you shine a light through it, you can barely even see through it. It's pretty opaque, so it's really thick. And what that actually does, believe it or not, is it'll tend to, especially on like, say, like a Mesa cabinet or a Mesa head, that the top ends could get a little shrill. The grill cloth will actually mellow out the really extreme, like the chirpy kind of top end, and it'll smooth out the response a little bit. So it's a great thing to have for another tonal variation.